All right, deep divers, welcome back. You wanted the rundown on the 2024 U.S. presidential election. So we've got this really interesting article from the Daily Beast. And yeah, let's just dive right into this thing. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get into it.
This article goes right after some of Trump's recent antics, especially at this recent town hall.
Oh, you mean like when he was joking about people fainting at his rallies?
Yeah.
Or when he was just vibing to the music instead of answering questions? It was like a reality TV show.
Yeah, and it just makes you think, like, is this part of a strategy or is this just Trump being Trump?
Yeah, but the article does say that some of his allies are telling him to focus more on policy.
Yeah.
But then he does stuff like this, so...
Yeah, it really kind of throws a wrench in the narrative that his supporters are trying to build. But this leads us into this part of the article where Trump talks about this enemy within.
Wait, enemy within? Like, are we talking about a spy thriller here? What's he talking about?
You're right, he's not talking about foreign agents. The article makes it clear that he's talking about political opponents like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi. He even suggests using the military against them, which is where things start to get really concerning, especially when you think about what John Kelly has been saying.
Wait, John Kelly? His former chief of staff? What's he saying?
Kelly's been very vocal recently, basically warning that if Trump is given the chance, he would rule America like a dictator. And when you pair that with Trump's enemy within rhetoric, it's kind of unsettling.
It's definitely unsettling. And the article goes on to analyze how Trump's whole approach seems to tap into this hyper-masculine bro culture. Like he's really playing to a very specific audience.
Exactly. And the article highlights how this plays out in his rhetoric, particularly his insults towards Kamala Harris, calling her stupid and a shit vice president.
Okay, I mean, those aren't exactly terms you'd expect a presidential candidate to be using.
Yeah.
But I mean, is it a winning strategy? And if so, what does that say about the voters who respond to it?
That's the million-dollar question. And speaking of demographics, the article talks about black voters in this election, specifically younger black men.
Oh, yeah, the NAACP poll.
Yeah.
It showed Trump gaining support among that demographic compared to previous elections. What's behind that shift? That's a pretty big deal.
Well, the article suggests a few different things. Maybe it's generational, or maybe it has to do with the economy. There's even this idea that some might see Harris as just another generic Democrat who doesn't really resonate with them.
It just shows you can't lump entire groups of people together. Everyone has their own reasons for voting the way they do.
Absolutely. Every vote has a story, and understanding those stories is key to understanding this whole election. Speaking of individual stories, the article talks about Liz Cheney. She's become an interesting figure in this election. Her call for Republican women to vote their conscience, even if it means voting against their party. It's quite a statement.
It's crazy to see a Cheney practically urging people to vote against a Republican. What does that say about the Republican Party right now, when someone like her is considered a rebel?
Yeah, it really shows the division within the party. And it shows that this election isn't just about party loyalty. It's about something much bigger. It's about American democracy.
The article even mentions Trump potentially undermining elections and rewriting history if he gets back into office, which is scary considering he's already been convicted of a felony. It's like a dystopian novel.
It definitely raises questions about the future of American democracy. And not just here in America. The article also talks about what a Trump victory would mean for other countries around the world.
Like, what kind of message would that send to countries struggling with their own democracies? Would it embolden authoritarian leaders?
It's a scary thought, and it shows how important this election is on a global scale. But coming back to America, the article also talks about how important women voters are in this election, especially white women.
That makes sense. They've always been a key voting bloc. And with Roe v. Wade being overturned, things have changed a lot.
The article even mentions Liz Cheney predicting that millions of Republican women might vote for Harris. It'll be interesting to see how this issue affects how women vote.
Yeah. And we can't forget about black voters, especially with the statistic about Trump gaining support among younger black men. There's a lot more going on than we might realize.
Right. The article suggests that a lot of things could be contributing to this shift, like generational differences, economic anxiety, or even just the perception of Harris being a generic Democrat. The black vote isn't a monolith. There's a lot of diversity of opinion within that community.
Okay, so we've talked about Trump's behavior, his rhetoric, the impact on different voter demographics, and the high stakes of this election. But what about actual policies? What are the candidates proposing? Did the article talk about that?
That's a good question. And it's something we'll talk about in the next part. While all the drama is definitely interesting, it's important to remember that there are real policy issues at play here, and those will affect Americans no matter who wins in November.
All right, deep divers. So we're back, and we've covered a lot of ground about this election, Trump's actions, the different voters, and just how much is at stake. But like you said, let's get into the actual issues. What are these candidates actually proposing?
Yeah, let's get down to the policy. The article doesn't really dive deep into policy specifics, but it mentions a few areas where they differ. Like it talks about Trump wanting to terminate the Constitution, which is wild. And then on the other hand, you have Harris, who's all about strengthening institutions.
Wow, that's quite a contrast. So it's like on one side, you have Trump leaning into this populist, maybe even authoritarian approach. And on the other, you have Harris running on these more traditional liberal values, like civil rights and social justice.
Exactly. And those different visions impact all sorts of policies. Like the article talks about immigration. We all know Trump's stance, build the wall and all that. And Harris is likely to take a more humane approach.
Yeah. And healthcare is a big one.
Yeah.
Trump tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and Harris probably wants to expand access to affordable care.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for so many people.
Definitely. And what about climate change? Trump doesn't really believe in climate science. And Harris is probably going to make it a priority. These aren't just abstract ideas. They affect all of us.
It really goes to show how important it is for people to understand where the candidates stand on the issues, because all these policies have real-world consequences.
Exactly. And it goes back to that question the article asked. If this election is about the next 40 years, not just 4, what kind of future do you want?
It makes you think. This isn't just about choosing a president for 4 years. It's about shaping the country for decades to come.
Right. So whether you vote in person or by mail, your vote is about so much more than just picking a name. It's about what kind of America you want to live in and what kind of country you want to leave for the next generation.
Well said. That's a wrap on our deep dive into this crazy election. But remember, deep divers, this is just the beginning. Keep learning about these issues, talk to people, and make your voice heard. And before we go, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us what you think. Until next time, stay curious.